Hello. I had to go get a snack break. Hey guys, so we are going live with Trisha and Philip. Thank you again for joining along. This has been a really cool, informative day, and I feel charged. And hold on. Let's see if I can figure this out. Hey!
Hello.
Hi, what's going on?
How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys doing?
Doing great.
We're great. We just got to Florida a few hours ago, so we've got a beach background.
I know, I'm like, wait a minute, that looks a lot warmer than it is here. That sounds nice.
Lovely.
Thanks for taking the time on your day off.
Yeah, always happy to talk about food and farming and
I love it.
those things.
I'd love for you guys to introduce yourselves really fast and just let everyone know who you guys are and what you're up to. And
Yeah, so my name's Trisha Sutton. I am the founder of Urban American Farmer, which is really has a goal of engaging people in our local food system.
Hi, I'm Philip Speer. I'm a chef and co-founder of Commodore, a Mexican restaurant in Austin, Texas, as well as a co-founder of Assembly, which is a company that brings virtual food experiences to your team for team building, connection, and to your doorstep as well.
well, I mean, you guys are a lot more than that. You guys are amazing badasses, and no, not just like, oh, I just grow. And no, I mean, like, you have an amazing setup with. I mean, I remember when hearing about like setting up the menu at Commodore and going off of what Trisha you're building and in the farm and your courses, which I am so excited. I was like on the waiting list as soon as I heard that ding and like time to sign up. I'm just what you guys are doing and what you're putting out there in the world, I think is just so badass and so cool. And you are continually like evolving and changing the way in which we eat and supporting our community at large, which I think is really cool and kind of goes into, into nature essentially, because it's the cycle of, feeding ourselves and feeding others and helping others. So when I was on I think it was either on your social or on your website, Trisha, but it said that you are a farmer ambassador. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, so one of my favorite local Austin urban farmers, Tiffany Washington, who has Job and Cob Farm. She likes to say she's the only Black urban farmer in Austin, and is super educated on the history of urban farming in Austin. So check her out. But she likes to call me the farm ambassador, and I just love that. I just think it's like such an amazing title, and I love that another farmer has given me that title. So I will gladly take it.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, the idea of being a farm ambassador is just that, I grew up on a farm in the middle of Illinois, and I just have a passion for farmers and the land. And, I really, I've spent my whole life around farmers. My grandfather, my uncle were full-time farmers. And then I've spent my whole adult life working in restaurants in some capacity. So I kind of like live in between those two worlds where, I can speak the language of the farmer and go and appreciate, and I can also hang out in the kitchen and understand how chefs work and what they need and how to kind of bridge those two pieces together. I really love to talk about how chefs and farmers are both kind of like, they're both artists to me. They're very creative and definitely those are trades, but they are also arts. And they both spend a lot of time on either the farm or in the kitchen. They're not out and about as much. They're working all the time. They're very committed to what they do. And so even farmers and chefs, they don't really spend a lot of time, interacting. And so for me, I can go visit the farmers. I can spend some time out in the field, which is so fulfilling to me. And I can also spend time in the kitchen helping the chefs learn more about farming, and taking them out to the field, taking the staff out to the field. So it's kind of, the ambassador is sort of bridging those two entities that really depend on each other and they're so intertwined, even if the exposure isn't always seen of those like networks and connections.
Yeah.
And I would say another thing that brings a lot of validity to your ambassadorship is the fact that, over the last few years, you've also created and run or owned your own urban farms and have brought products to the kitchens in our community. So bringing different herbs or crops or blossom garnishes, but even, beets, turnips, carrots. You brought us at Commodore for a full season and a half. You brought us so many different varieties of tomatoes that were delicious. So you also have the chops to back up the ambassadorship and those connections between the farm and the restaurant. But you as an accountant, you also have the knowledge of how the business works for us too, which has been really helpful because I think a lot of times we speak the same language, the chef and the farmer, but we don't always see we don't get to see the same outcomes, right? So having that liaison is sometimes very helpful, especially for a chef or a farmer who may not already have a leg up on those relationships, or just beginning to form those relationships.
That's amazing. So what happens first? Do you plan the menu first off of what you're growing, or do you go like, oh, Trish, okay, this is what we're gonna make tonight? Like, how do you base a menu off of? How does it all work?
Trisha has a very interesting answer to that question, wouldn't you say?
I don't know.
Well, you came to me one day and we're like, it's dawned on me that we don't know which came first because tell me the story. Tell the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that really propelled me into this endeavor was talking to chefs in Austin. When I got to Austin, I really wanted to connect with chefs, and so I started reaching out. I think I was talking to Michael Fotiger from Olame, and he was explaining how they decide what they're going to buy in the current season. And he would say we do it by looking back at Instagram last year and seeing what the farmers had posted around this time last year, and we kind of get this idea of oh yeah, this is what's going to be in season now, this is what's coming up. And when I would talk to the farmers, I would say how do you decide what crops you're going to grow? And they would say, well, last year we grew this and it sold this well, and so we're going to plan for this next year in the same way. And so I just, it occurred to me that we're always looking back. Both of those entities are looking backwards. And what happens if we start looking forward together? What happens if we start talking together and planning together, instead of continuing to grow the same crops year after year? What happens if we imagine together, there are, in any seed company at any time, they have tens of thousands of seeds, not even in their catalogs. There's so many varieties that we don't even get to experience because there's just not a capacity for us to take them all in.
Wow. That's amazing. So when you think then, looking forward, are there things then you're like, I've never tried this. I'm going to go with this variety of carrot and let's see what sticks.
Exactly. Yeah. There's this time around, just after Christmas and all of the seed catalogs start coming in, and you're that's farmer Christmas, right?
Yeah.
But all the seed catalogs are here.
Oh, I have
know
from 2018 still saved. They're just so beautiful to look at, for sure.
Mm-hmm. They are.
Yeah.
And then on the restaurant or the chef side, the excitement for seeing these new opportunities, or even it's especially, and it's usually urban farmers because there's kind of smaller plots. having these opportunities to like R&D or, research and develop some of these new crops and then bring them to the chef and say, hey, this year we have, for instance, a Badger Flame beet, which was a seed. Hey, Farmer Montana actually grew a whole lot of Badger Flame beets for us.
Oh, cool.
And he just joined us. Hi. And, seeing those, that is like one very small example, but seeing that new crop, and as a chef, you get really excited because you're like dreaming of possibilities of what you can put on the menu, how you can utilize this vegetable, how can I utilize the whole thing, how can I utilize it in a way that someone else hasn't, because we always want the thing that no one else has, right? So
Sure.
if we see this new, and then when I say new, of course it's not new, but it might be new to my menu, and so there's a lot of excitement there. So when you can bridge that and bring that together, it creates excitement both places.
Yeah, I mean, when I started growing in Austin, my first urban farm, I knew that I wanted to sell to chefs, and for me, like, the chef is the artist, and I think about their raw ingredients are their palette, like their literal color palette. The flavors, the textures. And so if I can bring a chef something new that they haven't seen before, that they can't get in our local markets, can provide an expansion of their creativity, that to me, that's just so exciting.
Yeah.
And then I think that chefs really set the stage in a community for food trends. It's like fashion, right? Like, you see shishito peppers on a menu, you see them on 10 menus across town, and now you can get them at the farmer's market and you can make your own dishes with shishito peppers. And that's an example from the last 8 years. But that happens, like, things get trendy, vegetables get trendy, and they do it by default. A chef will find something new and ask for more of it, and over time that happens. But we can also really put more of that into the market by just having some more conversations.
Is there anything that you've grown that's really surprised you?
I mean, these Badger Flame beets were such a great example. I mean, they were so delicious, so inspiring to me that we ended up creating a whole 2-night dinner series called Soil. We had them in restaurants all around town. They were bred by this amazing seed breeder from Madison, Wisconsin. His name's Erwin Goldman, and he spent 10 years perfecting and selecting beets to get this flame colored, it has yellow and orange rings on the center, and the outside is dark red, and they have these really delicious beet greens. And so everyone associates this dirt flavor with beets, right? Well, he bred that out because he was taking his kids with him into the field during this 10-year project, and he was trying to get them to taste them in the field, and they were like, no, these are gross, we don't want to eat beets. And so he was like, oh my gosh, this is my life work, I have to breed a beet that my kids will actually want.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and so they identified the chemical in the natural occurring chemical in the beet that produces that dirt-like flavor, and they selected the beets. They selected that out of the beets. So that's just one really cool example of what it is, what you can accomplish with some intention.
And when she says selected out, I mean, that is through season after season of growing these, tasting them, handpicking the ones that have that are going towards that flavor, and then replanting those. And then he also bred it to, not only, kind of select that flavor out, but bred it so that the plant was 100% usable. So there was zero waste. So that was something else that was important to him, is how do we create this, or not create, but how do we shape this crop to be a 100% or zero waste crop, so that when they do go into kitchens, you can use all of it. So when we did this dinner, the fun challenge was using the entire beet throughout the entire dinner from first course to last. And I mean, that's the peels, the stems, the leaves, and then obviously the beets themselves. And so that was a lot of fun, going from the most savory of dishes to sweet finishing dishes, and utilizing the beet throughout the whole dinner.
I love that. It's amazing. A lot of we've been talking a lot today, and with various people from people who are passionate about food to, you know, Rome Ranch and regenerative farming. And a lot of talk has been about like food waste too, and the amount of food waste that we produce as a culture is just mind blowing. So that when you can take something like a beet that some parts may not taste as good and be able to use all of it, like even the sweet, you know, and a sweet factor too, is just, I think, all the more like satisfying.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Um, so I have a couple of questions too, because I know you guys are probably enjoying, you know, like your alone time and vacay, so I don't want to take up too much of your time. But um, you talked about the soil of the beet, or like that dirt, I guess the dirt. What is your take on soil? And I know we all know how important like the integrity of soil is, but um, what's your thought on it? Like, what's your thought on the health of it for the plants and for people?
Yeah, I mean, I've had some amazing experiences, even just in Austin with this. I went to see a local urban farmer, Dorsey, at House Bar. And, you know, it was interesting because I have read and studied so much about farming and soil. That's like one of my favorite topics. But it was a really like object lesson to go visit Dorsey, because Dorsey doesn't prescribe necessarily to any of the like regenerative agriculture or biodynamic farming or organic practices. What she does is she just pays attention to what's going on in her plots. And so she, you know, she, instead of pulling plants out at the end of their cycle, she cuts them off and leaves the roots in the soil so that they naturally decompose. Because what we know about the roots is that around the roots is where all that you know, fungus and microbes and all of the really important information and organisms live, because they're transferring things to and from the roots from the soil. So leaving that plant in the soil instead of just pulling it out and pulling all that soil out with it was just like this mind-blowing experience for me of, oh, that's so easy. That's exactly what happens in nature. Something dies and then it just decomposes in place. And if you walk around her farm and you taste her herbs and her flowers, they're so sweet. You know, when you look at something like biodynamic farming, it's all about building the soil. And there's all of these like things that you add to the soil. Dorsey doesn't do that. She's just merely working with nature to encourage that to happen naturally. And her products are, they're so beautiful. They're so amazing and so delicious.
Oh, that's so cool. I'm gonna piggyback and go with you sometime.
Yeah,
I think it's
absolutely.
also fascinating. I was just listening to a podcast. I think it was I'm gonna butcher it, but the doctor's pharmacy or something. And um, Zach Bush was on, and he's a really interesting doctor, and he was just talking about the soil and looking at it like from a scientific level. And he was talking about like the mitochondria in the soil, and how like when we tilled the soil way back when, that's like really when things started to break down, and we really lost the integrity of our, you know, our dirt essentially. And there's this whole sort of infrastructure in place, like from fungi and how they talk to each other, and how they nurture the soil. And I just think it's just so fascinating that we take so much for granted. You know, it's like we assume like, oh no, we'll cut in here and we'll do the shortcut because in the short term, like it'll feed more people or it's better and we can do more and grow and grow and grow. And we lose sight of like our instincts, our senses, our intuition, our, you know, the natural cycle of things. And then we end up causing more destruction in the process. It's just, I think it's just so fascinating, like you're saying, even with the beets and being able to cultivate the right flavor of beet. You don't just like remove it and then I'm going to break it down and then next year we're going to have the perfect beet. It takes time, and that time means, like, as you know, you're a farmer, like cultivating that and like nurturing that and dealing with weather, and there's so many factors in that. And I think it's just so cool and fascinating, and breaking all that down. And it sort of brings back, you know, into sustainability and weaving it into sustainability, where we need to just have that connection, I think, more to our food and where it comes from, and understanding and respecting it. you know, and nurturing the soil and having that sweet flavor that Dorsey has, you know, I think is it shows like all the love and nurture, you know, that what you put into it, you'll get out of it.
Well, as someone who didn't grow up on farms and had more of an urban upbringing, you know, the first time I remember the first time that I ate something that was grown, and I pulled it out of the ground and put it in my mouth, and the difference of that food from out of the soil versus the food that comes off a grocery store shelf or display was life-changingly different. And I'm not even exaggerating. I mean, it literally smacked me in the face. And I really encourage anyone who has the opportunity to do that to find a non-commercial farm, a smaller farm, and whether it's an urban farm or community garden, or even growing your own and eating that food straight from the soil or straight from the ground, and comparing that to the food that you find in the grocery store that can be anywhere from 30 to 180 days old before it even hits your counter, and what the difference is in that, especially once you start going and finding organic farms and biodynamic farms, etc., or a farm like Dorsey's. And Dorsey's foods have the most distinct, most defined flavors. The few things that she grows of any farm around the community.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and I will just add to that. I mean, whether you grew up with it or not, we forget over time. You know, my mother is a great example of this. So when I started growing tomatoes, she grew up on a farm growing fresh tomatoes in the garden. That's what they ate. And since then has been buying them in the grocery store for the last like 40 years. And when she tried my tomato again, she was like, oh, like that's different. And I was, it was so interesting to me because I knew that she grew up, she had that experience. But I just think over time, as we eat from the grocery store and we have a different level of quality or expectation of flavor or texture of our vegetables, they can be so different from what actually you can grow when you're doing it on a smaller scale, where you're not mass producing, you're not producing it in a greenhouse, you're not producing it hydroponically, aquaponically. When you're really like producing food in a scale in the soil where you can tend to the soil and really like pay attention to what's going on, it's just a totally different product. And I think that speaks so much to the interconnectedness of all of it, that flavor is associated with a wider variety of nutrients and minerals. And so you can actually say like flavor, texture, color, variety is directly connected to the food that we put in our body and our health.
Yeah, it's amazing. I could geek out on this. I love that, and the interconnectedness, and there are so many people right now who are desensitized to flavors, but also are lacking in minerals because they're not getting it from the proper soil or sources. I'll ask you one more question because I don't want to keep you guys, but for someone who, like, let's say they live in an area where they don't have access to these kinds of ingredients, or the restaurant, or they don't have the restaurants maybe that we have in big urban cities, how would you go about giving them advice into finding good quality ingredients or the right restaurant, or asking like where the food comes from, or what kind of questions would they ask, or what would they look for?
That's such a hard question to answer right now, because I think we are in a time where, restaurants know, all restaurants, large scale, small scale, know that people want to see farms on menus. And so if you don't really know about who your local farms are and who, a farm name that is like far away or large scale commercial agriculture, it's really hard to know. I mean, we put a lot of trust in this system, and the best advice I can give is just go to your farmers markets if you have them and get to know the farmers. Remember the names. Say hello. Go ask if you can go see the farms. I got involved in the Austin farm scene by literally showing up at the farmers markets and asking if I could come to their farm.
No way.
Yeah, that's it. And they were so happy to have me, and you would be surprised how infrequently people actually go visit and show up at these farms.
No way.
You'd also be surprised, and you say people who may not have the access, how many farms are not only in urban areas but in directly suburban areas as well, where if you just poked around a little bit, you're going to find food growing, and it might really surprise you. And also, the CSA is a great way to get farm fresh produce into your home. So always look for a local CSA that can bring products directly to your doorstep, generally delivering in the parameters all over any urban areas.
That's awesome. I so appreciate it, you guys. This is so cool and so informative, and I would really love to continue this conversation. I know that we haven't talked yet about what we're doing, but we will continue this conversation. And I adore you guys. Trisha, I know we haven't met yet. Well, actually, Philip, we haven't met in person either. I feel like we've met because
I've not met in person, just a lot of the Zooms.
I know, sorry, lots of Zooms. But I love what you guys are doing, and I love supporting you, and I so appreciate you being on this platform and talking about what you guys are doing, because you guys are total badasses, and just thank you so much for your time.
Well, and thank you for the support. I mean, it really means so much to really getting the message out there, and that's what we're here to do, is to help educate and inspire and inform people and spread the good work.
I love it.
And to show that it can be done. This is doable for everyone. You can make it happen.
Oh yeah, I love it. Well, thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Bye, Jen.
Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thanks.